And this becomes a dual challenge if you are a very young nation. If you're a nation 40 years old and seeking from the 2nd of August in 1962 to find direction, to find purpose, to find meaning in the cacophony of voices about what we are as human beings and how we shape ourselves as nations, if we are 42 or thereabouts years old, how do we therefore line up with other nations across the world, many of whom have now decided that a nation state may no longer be guided, directed, or influenced by divine revelation, but that now the primary duty and responsibility of politicians, decision makers, people in the media, the press, our philosophers, the primary duty is to find our own way in life. It's an awesome responsibility for any nation to undertake. You know, just this morning I was talking to a professor of research from England, Cecilia, over breakfast. What should have been like a 20-minute conversation turned out to be a 1.5-hour chat, which finished as we walked around Emancipation Park. We were talking about the very concept of liberation and reparation. We began to wrestle with the difficulties which many nations, such as Jamaica, and many people of African origin face as we look to a future and try to determine how we shift the negative impact of our histories. How do we move beyond slavery? How do we move past bondage? How do we redefine ourselves as a nation state for the well-being of our children and our children's children? There was a lot of talk, therefore, about the fact that we stand in the bicentenary of the abolition of the slave trade. And when we think about the fact that so much of what we now suffer as a nation is owed negatively to the history of slavery, there is a fantastic challenge facing us. How do we balance the past and the atrocities of the past with a hopeful, positive future for ourselves and our children? We spoke about the need for forgiveness. We spoke about the need for apologies. We spoke about the need for reparation. We went beyond that because we felt, well, reparation is one thing, but what about the concept of redemption? Redemption is far more powerful even than reparation, because redemption speaks about forgiveness. Redemption remembers the past in a positive and optimistic light. Redemption looks at the past but filters the future through the possibility of hope. Redemption is a very powerful biblical idea. And as we thought about that, we thought about the nation of Israel. Do you know, the interesting thing about the nation of Israel is that it gives us possibly the best example we have ever had in human history of a people who left the past slavery, who left the past servitude, who left the past negative corporate consciousness, and who moved into a very different future, a nation now more than 3,000 years, 4,000 years old, pulling its weight, punching above its weight in the 21st century. Why? Because something very profound happened to them between their experience of slavery and their experience of freedom. It's actually quite awesome. You and I sometimes get quite bogged down. I don't know how you feel about reading through the book of Deuteronomy, through the book of Leviticus, through the book of Numbers. They are a catalogue of ordinances and laws and stipulations and expectations. These books cover everything from domestic arrangements, sexual practices, political arrangements, constitutional ideas, health and safety. The books cover everything for human flourishing. You know, the thing about this powerful period between Israel's slavery and Israel's freedom was this. God took 2 years after he released them from bondage, and for 2 years he had them around the foot of Mount Sinai. And what he said to them was this: you used to be a slave nation. I have redeemed you to be a people of promise. And these laws, these ideas about how you live as husband and wife, these ideas about bringing up your children, these ideas about handling your money, these ideas about agriculture, these ideas about politics, is my way of saying to you, this is your program for a redemptive future. This is the way you define yourself as a nation state. This is the way you put the past behind you and live for the future. And for 2 years, what God did to the people of Israel was a kind of cultural deprogramming, a kind of a psychological and spiritual and cultural debriefing. He said, you used to be slaves, now you are my people. You used to be in bondage, now you are really free. It was a process of re-education. I invite you to look at the founding principles of any nation in the last 200 years which has sought to define its future and to educate itself about its future. I think you will have to look very hard and very diligently to find a set of principles more biblical, more redemptive, more hopeful than what Yvonne has reminded us about in MAP. I want to say to us as Jamaicans that the motto we have, that the anthem we have, that the pledge we have was a nation's way of saying, this is the best formulae, this is the best arrangement, this is the best system of rethinking which will set a nation free. It was Jamaica's way of saying, we define ourselves by God's precepts. It was Jamaica's way of saying, if we're to put the past behind us and move into a new, truly liberated future, a future which is spiritually liberated, a future which is nation building, a future which is filled with hope, our promises are held in the map. Yvonne, I have to tell you that I was reading through the book again in Emancipation Park today, and it nearly moved me to tears. It may not be the most academic thing I have ever read, and I don't think it was written to be the most academic thing one ever reads. It was not the most exhaustive account of how a nation should respond, and I don't think Yvonne wrote it as the most exhaustive account of something to be read. But I think it's got a sense of urgency about it. I think it has a sense of the prophetic about it. I think it is one of the most powerful reminders Jamaica has that its well-being and its self-identity and its prosperity is not bound up by copying what other nations do, but by reminding itself that if indeed it's true that God is sovereign over all nations, that God does expect things from individuals and from governments, then this is the best combination of reminders available to any nation on the planet that I know of. It's far more biblical even than the American Declaration of Independence. It's far more thorough in its biblical ideals than anything written in the last 1,000 years that I can imagine. Ladies and gentlemen, as we spend our time together, I hope we will find this sobering, redemptive, and I hope that what is launched tonight is not just a book, but possibly one of the greatest, most urgent, and most biblical reminders of what God expects of any nation which wishes to embrace righteousness in order to be exalted in its future days. May God bless not just this book, but the conversation I hope all of us will participate in. Thank you so much, and God bless you.